even that great. And that's why we can't explain how some of this stuff was built, because, you know, the builders that came in and built the set were different than the Greys. The Greys are the biological material producers, so that you could put, they call it the ISB. The soul is the ISB, so that they can put the energy or the battery or the ISB into the biological suit to operate it. So they're the ones that just deal with the biological material and the building of the biological suits. Well, and they do a lot of different kinds of planets. You know, they deal in, you know, commerce, planetary commerce, you know, for biological. You know, you need some slave workers. Hey, we've got the biological material. Then they go to the other extraterrestrials that deal in the heaven experience, where they harvest, you know, after we die, our energetic body or the battery, and they hold it captive. Sometimes they take it, you know, to another planet to put in different kinds of biological suits. When I do sessions with people, sometimes this is the kind of stuff that I see. I'm shown that they lived on other worlds or other planets. Sometimes I see them here again, sometimes not in a human form. But, you know, I see how they move them all over the place, the energy parts of themselves, and then they put them in different kinds of components. And, you know, I've seen in the last 5 years, I've seen some of the most horrific things with people. I've seen the contracts to the future lives, and that a lot of people here and now or have already contracted to the
You know about
future.
soul contracts?
Well,
so you do regressions?
No, I do ancient types of shamanism work,
Okay.
where I actually go into people's fields, and I try to, my main thing is to figure out what's causing the disease, what's causing their health problems. And it will send me to all different kinds of places. And I have a lot of clients that are MK Ultra people. And so I help them to integrate by pulling, you know, their selves back together from all kinds of different places and spaces. And I teach people, you know, shamanism practices to work on, to try to help them with a lot of this different stuff. But in the future lives, like we're talking like, you know, 2300 or whatever, I've seen some pretty horrific stuff in the last 5 years here in this world, and what people are actually used for. And I've been really trying to deactivate that stuff when it pops up and I see it in people, because it's pretty horrific. It's kind of like where we're moving towards. And like I said, there's already people that are contracted with other people without knowing it, to be, you know, when we as humans are, because of all the nuclear fallout and everything else, are bad, they surgical robot-y things, and they start putting us in them, the ISBs in them. But we are like walking machines that they take the elite, who are like all preeny and kind of look like those extraterrestrials without their suits on, and they plug them into us, and so they ride us around. So I've seen this like in 2300s, and so they operate us by mind control, and they use us, you know, as energy, the legs and the arms, and as transportation, and it's really hard to explain without being able to draw it.
The movie is called The Signal, and it's everything you just described. People need to see it because they are experimenting with, like you said, using this energy, and they were trying to merge their technology with the human form, and that's what the whole plot of the movie was about.
Yeah, but they plug these, you know, elites who are still alive, but they can't do anything because their bodies are small and pruny from all of the nuclear stuff. So anyway, it's just like the creepiest thing. When I first saw it, I literally almost vomited. And I had a really hard time trying to tell my client. It was the first time visit she had with me. And it was such an intense, you know, session that she kind of went batshit crazy for about 4 years, but there was nothing I could do about it. You know what I mean? It's like, it is what it is. And I try to soften the blow sometimes as much as possible. And I do get in there and convert it. You know what I mean? As much as I possibly can, because that is not a future that I want to go down. I mean, when we were going to have those 3 days of darkness in 2012, I literally stopped that from happening. I spent like 2 weeks doing nothing but saying, no, we're not going through 3 days of darkness. It's just not going to happen. The people on the planet will totally freak out, and they will destroy themselves because they're going to think, you know, it's biblical. And it's like,
right, exactly. That's what it leads to. It just be like, I mean, they show that in the movies too. That society breaks down, like the rival.
Yeah. And so I just didn't really want to participate in that. So I spent 2 weeks energetically sending that off because I was like, that's just, you either kill me now and do it, or I'm not participating in it, and I'm not going to allow any of this to be participated in. It just
and in fact,
so anyway,
that's one of those things that seeded your timeline to get us here where we're at today, is the refusal to play their game anymore. So now we've only got like a half an hour left. Let's get you onto the Red Plague program.
Yeah. So this is kind of a really kind of intense thing because I haven't really found other people that had gotten this programming. So I'm a star kid. I was born here. I was brought here. Had never been here before. Have always been awake. Have always been aware. I mean, you have all these people calling themselves star children or star seeds. I contact them, and they're frauds. You know what I mean? They just kind of throw these terms around because they don't have any information. They don't have any abilities. Now, there are children that Mary Rodwell, who I consider one of the major agents, government agents, who shouldn't be allowed around the star kids at all. And she's been collecting data. I had run in with her myself. And so she's, you know, showing people in the public like what some of these star kids are capable of doing. We can speak in other languages, not the kind of languages here. We have unbelievable abilities that, you know, we can do that far surpass this world. I never really fit in. I spent most of my life trying to figure out how to act normal, but the problem is my energetic field just makes people crazy. So people,
it makes them attracted to it. Yeah, they sense something and they like attack.
Well, actually, they're repelled by it.
Oh, repelled.
They get into my field and all their darkness starts to come up, and you'll find this in the Anastasia books.
You get that immediately.
Yeah, in the Anastasia books, the same thing happens to her. You know, when the people that have darkness that they haven't dealt with come into her vicinity, all of their darkness roots come up. And it shows them in their disgust. And I've worked on people. I have this one client that I worked on, and he had an out-of-the-body experience when I was working on him. And he looked down at himself, and he said the only word that I could use was ghoul. He said, I'm a ghoul. And I said, well, you know, you have, you know, the rest of your life to change that. You know, but the things that you've done have made you that way, kind of a thing. So anyway, back to the Red Plague.
Real quick, have you seen Steven Spielberg's Taken series, right?
No. I don't really have TV. Okay. So
yeah, well, it's good. It came out in 2002, I think, after 9/11, but it's really good. They show the abilities really well, or at least they dramatize it, but I mean, a lot of it's real. Like you said.
I don't like the mind control, and now that we have digital, I don't like that pulse, because it's hypnotic, you know, and so like I haven't had my own TV since like mid-90s, kind of a thing, and I really
that's really good.
Monitor.
I stopped watching when I was 17. I knew something was really bad. I didn't know what it was. You can't put your finger on it.
Well, it makes you asleep, and then people, this digital one, it has a pulse that people can't hear. And that's why people will, get into accidents trying to get from work to home so that they can get that feed off that pulse. They can go into that. It's like a deep hypnotic.
I've heard of it called the Lily Wave, but I mean, there's many different people studied it and found different characteristics of it.
The thing is when you're in that hypnotic state, anything can be imprinted into you and you'll believe it. So everything that they see on TV that's pulsing, the drugs, I've seen since we've had digital TV, a huge movement of people have turned away from anything alternative in health. And they only go to doctors. And it's the craziest thing, but that's all they see when they're under this pulse, this hypnotic pulse, right, is these drugs. And what's the biggest problem right now is pharmaceutical drugs people are on.
Yeah, and, it just killed my grandma.
A lot of these... Yeah, so and a lot of the other things too is that these drugs that they're giving you, a lot of them have opiates of some kind in them, and they they put opiates in the chemo drugs. A lot of the drugs that epilepsy, arthritis, like all the drugs. And what they do is they block the neurotransmitters, which means that your brain no longer communicates with your body, which means that you can't eject entities out of your system anymore. And you have no control over your energetic system anymore. Because your brain, which is the hard drive of your body and your system, can't pay attention and regulate it. So you become the boogie hotel is what I call them, and until people get off those kinds of medicines for whatever usage, you just get possessed by whole gangs of entities.
That's
that
real.
Are
for people,
gnarly.
For people not on the pharmaceutical, drugs, it's usually alcohol and, recreational, going to the bar every week and getting inebriated.
But those are called spirits too, right?
Yeah, they call it spirits. It's in the language,
right.
They corrupted our whole language.
Yeah, so the thing is like there's a reason why they call it spirits. And, in voodoo and some of the other types of...
I live in the voodoo capital of the country.
Yeah, but they drink in order to lower their walls, and that brain and the neurotransmitter, they block it using alcohol so that it's easier to be possessed, so that people can see and talk to the possession being in the body, and then they expel it. But there's only a level that you can expel it. Because then you're connected to it forever, as long as you live. And then sometimes if you come back here, you're going to be connected to that thing too. And if you die, it'll connect to somebody in your family, So people have to be really careful about these pharmaceutical drugs. So the Red Plague. When I was in 5th grade, my dad, so I was kind of in special programs kind of my whole life. Like, I know that I went to a special doctor here in Reno, that doctor has never been heard of. There was not that doctor. I saw his nurse working as a checker 30 years later at a grocery store, and had a dialogue with her, and just how strange that she acted. And I thought, here you are, like this RN working in pediatrics, and then what, now you're a checker?
Wow.
Like, you spent the last 30 years being a grocery checker?
Yeah.
No. So my whole life has been that way, and I've been chased by NASA. My real father, he was chased by the government. He kind of had superpowers and whatever else from Russian shaman type lineages. He had got a master's degree from Berkeley in parapsychology, and the government, basically destroyed him. And so he lived in hiding his entire life, and so I didn't really get to have a relationship with him. And then, my mom was taken, because I come from also, so being a star kid, but I also have 2 parents that came from really strong bloodlines of good people, of healers and people that had abilities.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I got the double decker. I got it from, my dad's side that I didn't get to be raised with, and my mom's side. My mom was taken basically by a handler. Married was how she got out of the house, and he eventually took her back to Boston. Nobody knew about it, and he put her in. This was pretty typical back in those days. If they didn't like you, or they didn't like your bloodline, or they didn't like your abilities, they put you in a mental hospital. So my mom was literally raped and drugged and fractured. Being this really precious elfin type being who could grow things in sand. She could grow a zucchini plant taller than a human in sand. And just her type of abilities. But she was basically cracked, before I was born.
That's really common.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend on the other side of the pond in Denmark. His close friend, I'm not going to say name, but he's from the Koch family, the Koch brothers, and his parents was also fractured in the same way and ended up institutionalized because they had to. She didn't want to play, according to her contract or whatever else. That's really good.
Yeah. No, I have MK Ultra people that, just the stuff that has happened to them just blows my mind. Like, one of them, they've taken her out of her body when she was a little girl for like 400 years or whatever, and they used her to operate a satellite. They used her energetic, processes to operate a satellite in the atmosphere. It's crazy stuff. People couldn't even believe like what goes on or what's happening. But anyway, so go back to the Red Plague. So when I was in 5th grade, my dad that raised me was always trying to keep me safe. He had been in World War II. He had been a private, but he was a sniper. He was anti-war. My whole life, I didn't even know that there were wars on the planet until I was like mid-20s, and we watched the Schindler's List together, and that was the first time I ever had seen the horrific abuse of what people are capable on this planet. Like, it was a huge reality shift. And he was always trying to get me away from these people because he kind of took me over, taking care of me when I was about 1 and watching the craziness that was going on. And so, they would gain control of my mom, and she would get divorced from him and move away. And then he would show up and take, even though I wasn't his real kid, my sister was, he would collect us and take us back with him. And then it was forced my mom to come back with him, and he was constantly trying to take care of us and protect me, from what was going on in this world and the bad guys that were constantly, trying to infiltrate. So, we also, because of this, had to grow. I grew up in, pretty considerable poverty, and we had to move a lot. I mean, we moved like 3 or 4 times a year. I mean, maybe
different states or within Nevada?
Within Nevada, but this particular period, we moved. My dad really wanted to get us out of here, so we moved to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and we lived in the truck and camper, basically. I mean, it was pretty normal back then because people weren't really homeless, because you could live anywhere, like you could live in your truck or a campground. KOAs were super cheap. You know what I mean? Most people living in KOAs didn't really have a solid place to live. Nowadays, you can't really do that kind of stuff. But we lived in the KOA campground for the whole summer until winter came. And then my dad got us a house, and then I went to school, and instantly I went to this school, elementary school that was public, and like weird stuff. They would call me out of the class, like I'd be the only one that they'd come and get out of my class. And there were several other kids in this elementary school, and then they would take us to this room, and they'd have this one teacher that I didn't see most of the time. The only time I saw this teacher is when he was teaching this class, and we would just go into this class, and we could do whatever we wanted to do. We could draw on our book or do homework or whatever, but we had to listen to this story, which now I know it's programming. And so NASA has never really been, I tell people all the time, NASA has never been a space agency. NASA is a human weapons agency where they cultivate and develop human weapons, and specifically special people that are kind of born onto this planet who have early on abilities. I mean, I was raising bugs from the dead on the front porch when I was 5 years old. You know, like, I was not normal, and I did not come from a family that was any way, shape, or form normal.
Oh, yeah.
At all. So, anyway, and so, you know, we went the whole time that I was at that school. And then these people, like, talked my parents into me going with them. And there was, like, this weird kids program that I would go to, like, once or twice a week. And I don't remember, like, it was religious. But there was also this segment of mind control, because there was this, like, mega reward punishment stuff. And they would have stuff out on tables and baskets and stuff like that. And you already knew how to kind of play the game. You know what I mean? To get the rewards. There was just kind of certain things or certain answers or, you know, whatever else, behaviors. And it was very much, you know, a reward thing. I got really obsessed during that period of living in Idaho when I was in 5th grade with perfectionism. And I even was in the Bluebirds. And within 6 months, I had acquired every patch on my vest because I just systematically went through the book and did all of the different things to earn the patch. It was like just a really weird period of my life. And at the school, they had this program that it was a book. And this is before they really had books on tape, right? So I always ask myself, I can't remember exactly what this book on tape supposedly was played on, but it was audio. We heard it. And I always seem to think it was a tape, you know, that was put into a tape player. But it doesn't really make sense on that timeline. And the other thing about this school that was really weird is each class was not enclosed. It was in a star pattern. And so the center of 10 classes was open. It was an open area. So even though we were in this other class doing this red plague mind control program, everyone could see us over there. And there was a lot of hostility from the other kids that we got to go over there. You know, like, nobody really understood why. We didn't even understand why. And we kind of thought maybe it's because, you know, we were in trouble. And so, you know, it was like detention or something. But we would be downloaded and programmed. There was only like 5 of us with this red plague story. And so basically the red plague story from start to finish, I think it lasted like 4 or 5 months. And then it came to an end. So start to finish. And basically it was the story about the future where the wealthy people basically lived in quarantined glassed houses. And the thing about this story that it was so good was like I could see it, you know, like I could visualize it. I knew that I was one of the people that was outside of the glass house. You know what I mean? I was one of the infected people. And it was like a apocalyptic world. It had a very like red tone to it. There wasn't any trees or grass or anything like that. It was super hot. The people inside these glass, you know, dwellings did not come outside because they could be infected. And also it stayed, you know, heat and cool, you know, controlled inside. And they also had the ability to grow food in these glass dwellings. So there was really no reason for them to leave or go anywhere. And then there were still fragments of people. And this apocalyptic thing, it didn't say how it got to this apocalyptic future, right? There was like no lead up. It just started in this apocalyptic future where there was massive plagues killing most of the population, how the elite kind of designed these like glass houses that, they were going to, that they were living in, and how you could see them inside the houses, like eating and living a happy life. And then you look around outside with all the other people that you're with, and, people don't have hair, they don't have teeth, they have big gaping wounds all over their bodies, and all of this other stuff. They give this
to young people through video games now. They've got this whole thing called the Fallout series, and it's like one of the most popular ever made. So that's what the youth have.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is like, it really, I haven't actually been able to stall that programming because I'm watching it as it's inching ahead here. But the one thing that I've done with that program, because they use you to create that in the future, right? They use you to bring that outcome like magic.
Yeah, they want it to be our choice, though. They don't want us to be forced. They want it to be our choice that leads to it.
Right. So I really try to thwart that. And what I do is I'm more interested in fixing the soil and the microbial mass and planting trees and growing food and doing a lot of these other things, because I feel like it goes directly against that programming. So in my life, I've kind of morphed into, biodynamic farmer, herbalist. I'm crafting, medicines. I'm out in the environment all the time looking at all kinds of different landscapes and like what would be necessary to heal that landscape and what I could plant in it, or, what I could get other people to do. And I try to teach classes to show other people and teach people that they're not interested. But, for me, it's my way of countering the red plague, because I'm still watching it play out. And I know that it's so kind of embedded in me in a weird place that I haven't been able to deactivate it. So I counter it by what the direct opposite of that would be, which is creating life at the base foundation of what we have here in this world. What creates life: trees and oxygen and clean water and plants and grasses and, a lot of these kinds of things. So that's the only way that I can do the direct opposition to it. So, and while I'm trying to heal all these other, MK Ultra people to get their programming shut down, to get them integrated.
Yeah, it's your way of healing yourself too, because as you're healing the external world, you're also healing yourself, what they've done.
I think that's true, but I have the ability to heal myself before any of that stuff. I could resurrect bugs from the dead. And it's interesting because I think, people look at my astrology chart, like my natal chart, and they call it the resurrection chart, point blank. So I know part of my thing here is like resurrection, how do I resurrect, to sustain, to restore, to regenerate what already exists, right? It's just we have to get more people involved with this whole thing. And so many people are just so hypnotized and mesmerized, with their computers and their TVs that they don't even leave their house, and they don't even go and look at a tree or what's happening with how many trees are dying. There's huge forests across Colorado that there's not even one living tree left in. It's like standing matchsticks. But yet people just don't even know that that's happening because they don't even go out and look. And then those that are conscious, they just give up. They just keep assimilating more information, and that's not solving anything. It's not helping to stop the chemtrails. It's not stopping, the proliferation of, more microwave weapons and nuclear energy.
A lot of it is we give up our power. Like, I saw this in the movement, and I like Mark Passio. He said that when Trump got elected, that this really changes nothing. This is just a moment in time, and it's up to us. It's not Trump's job to fix the whole world, and he's just one person, and whether he's controlled or not, it's humans' job.
Right, and that's one of the things, like, Russia's lucky is that Putin, in 2014 said, no more genetically modified food, no more vaccinations of the Russian people, because he said, I don't want my people to become Americans, where they don't have the capability to actually think anymore. Or they're poisoned and their chromosomes are, completely destroyed. And, if you go to Weston Price's work, because he's kind of, so Victor Schellenberger and Weston Price are huge components of the biodynamic and Rudolf Steiner work. Those are things that we study. And biodynamics, nutrition and nutritional density through soil and growing food is like, that's our thing. And Weston Price showed that, people in tribal cultures had perfectly white and straight teeth. But once they were started, and this is like in the 40s.
They also didn't get acne. I studied extensively on that type of thing.
Right. So the thing is that, well, and what do Americans do? They have orthodontics. They have the teeth changed so that you cannot see the chromosomal damage. The crookeder your teeth are, the more chromosomal damage you have, and you pass that on.
It's considered a rite of passage to get your wisdom teeth, yanked out in the West. Well, it's like 80% of everyone.
And have your teeth straightened, which also, once you have orthodontics too, it's also a type of mind control, because your 3 chakras, your throat chakra, your pineal chakra, and your top chakra, which are generators, they open and close. They have a diaphragm when you breathe. They actually help to pump spinal fluid into your brain, number one, and they also generate power into those areas of your body. So when you get orthodontics, it cuts all that off. It changes your palate in such a way that now you're further dumbed down. I've seen it in kids where, they've had astringent personality changes into more paranoia, going from loving and caring to completely paranoid and freaked out. So a lot of this stuff in American culture, Putin is right, can't be allowed in other cultures. If you want to clean up the barely started mess, because, we're like 5 generations into food poison, vaccine poison, environmental poison, orthodontics, surgeries, pharmaceuticals. And so we have 5 generations of hereditary chromosomal defects that are not going to be able to be fixed. It's just, it's unresolvable. And I know this from working with brilliant people in medicine, that, these people are going to have to be, taken care of. And I think because it is such a mess, even, the human type controllers are trying to figure out how to
Bridgette,
wipe them out.
When you say 5 generations, does that put it back into what, mid-1940s?
Yeah, probably somewhere around there. Around the turn of the century when we started being industrialized. That's where Steiner really started seeing the changes in the soil and the seeds. And that's also when Schellenberger was really doing a lot of work with the soil as well, and starting to see that the microbial mass damage due to, industrial ways that we grow food, even using metal and soil. So that's about the time where, all of it, started becoming destroyed.
All right. Let me thank everybody in the audience who are listening on Steampunk Radio. We are just about at the end of the show. You've been listening to The New Way. I've got Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff and Pegasus with me talking on the show today. And we will be continuing the conversation in the Discord. But thank you all on the TuneIn app and at Steampunk Radio for listening. I'm Dr. Lenny Thyme, and it's been a pleasure to entertain you again this morning. Thanks loads. And we're off air, but I'm going to keep the recording on and we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, that's fine. Because I know that when you send me the files to put on my YouTube channel, because you played Aerosmith, they'll block that for copyright. So the first section of the files they won't allow on. So I always tell people, like, part 1 was blocked, but there's part 2, 3, and 4. Listen to those. So anyway, so Victor Schallenberger. I always love this story. This is such a good story because in biodynamics, we really focus in on the soil to heal everything in this environment. And Victor Schallenberger, studied lots of different things other than water. A lot of people don't realize that. But he went to, I think it was like, I don't remember the country, but we studied a lot of this in my biodynamic when I went to Rudolf Steiner College for my biodynamic, and I did nutritional stuff there, and I did this work called phenomenology that was so, to this day, still blows me so far away. I'd like to teach classes doing phenomenology, but it's so far kind of out of the norm for people that it's really hard to actually put classes together, even online, to help people with study. So anyway, Victor Schallenberger went to, I think it was like Denmark, or I think it was like a country like that's kind of like long and skinny, where it has a very north section and a very south section.
Is it smaller than Netherlands? Because that would be Denmark, and it's got Jutland, I think.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I just know it's in that kind of vicinity, you know what I mean? But it had a very north part and a very south part. There wasn't an eastern part or a western part, because in the information it was described as the northern part and the southern part. And so so the king of Denmark or whatever found out about Victor Schallenberger and asked him to come. I mean, the great thing about those days, this is what I think Lenny and I are both really old school, because we would have really fit in during that period. Yeah, contact us. We'll come up there and do some research and check everything at the state for 4 months, for 2 years. So, come up with a theory of, like what's going on and how to fix it. I'd love to have that kind of a life. I try to have that kind of a life. It just doesn't always work out that well, but anyway, so the king, calls Victor Schallenberger, says, we'll pay for you to get here. He travels there. He stays for a really long period of time. But the problem is that the king, they're having a problem with their agriculture. They grow agriculture big time in the north part and the south part, because, they have to feed all their people.
They have the most advanced indoor agriculture in the world. Right across in the Netherlands, they're the second biggest exporter of all agricultural products after the United States. And they're a tiny little country, and it's amazing what they're able to do.
Right. So anyway, so Victor Schallenberger goes there, and the premise is because the north and the south used to be equal. Everything was equal, but they were seeing a huge decline in the ability to grow anything in the south, and also there was this drought that had come in over the south area of this country, and they couldn't figure it out because it made no sense. I mean, the north and south were pretty much identical in the environment and, all this other stuff, so they couldn't figure out what the heck was happening in the south. And back then it would have been really, really a serious thing if a whole half of your country started to go into drought and you couldn't grow food. It would be like massive starvation for your people. So they bring Victor Schallenberger in, and then he does this really long, lengthy study, and he goes, and documents all the agricultural stuff and the environment and everything in the north. Then he goes down to the south and he does the whole thing. And what he finds out is probably one of the most astonishing pieces of information that nobody knows about. And so what he discovered was that in the South, they started using steel plows, where in the North, they were still using wood plows.
Wow.
And this is where Schallenberger discovered.
Ionic, yeah, it does have an electrochemical effect as it
actually,
the ground.
Right. Actually, what it does is it kills the microbes in the soil.
Yeah, that would make sense because, Yeah.
Well, then he went on to later on discover that if you don't have microbes in the soil, it doesn't attract water anymore, and you will have a drought. Because the organisms that are monitoring the soil have a relationship with all the other elements and the environment. And so if the microbes are gone, so say all health reasons, all your health problems are microbial, because what's the door to disease? Inflammation. Well, what's inflammation?
Cell walls also soak up water.
Well, but they don't if the microbe leaves the cell.
Yeah.
So when two things happen, you're so sterile because you're not re-ingesting microbes from your environment, which means you're not growing food and kind of eating that dirt on that food, but you have to have really good restored soil, right, in order to get the microbial mass. And so these healing machines that they're talking about that are coming, that can heal anything, they can, but there's no long-term health involved, because those machines are going to send out frequencies and stuff like that are going to kill whatever remaining microbes you have in your body to heal that disease. So the next disease that you get is going to be worse, because you're not eating microbes from the water or from the soil, and you're not walking around you don't have an environment where you're absorbing microbial mass. And that's the key to biological life here, is microbial mass. So two things happen. You're either so sterile. I've known people that have done so many parasite cleanse that they've killed all the microbes in their blood and through their whole entire body. And then they're on death's doorway because they don't have microbes to actually. Under healthy conditions, microbes break down and rebuild. You're a compost. Your biological suit is a compost. So they break it down, and then they turn it into something that's usable. So when the microbes go rogue and you go into inflammatory disease, the microbes that have been contained in the cell, including their fecal matter, right? Because they off-gas a byproduct.
Mitochondria used to be, they think that we absorbed them and they became symbiotic with us.
Yeah, this is not what I've learned from the immunologist, right? That's not.
Yeah, that'd be good, because I don't know.
So what happens is that you have your red cells that have, like you have 50,000 trillion red cells or whatever, that are delivering water and oxygen and food and whatever else. But you have like 50,000, microbes or whatever in that cell, which is making it hold its puffy, round structure. So what happens is you eat the wrong food, you eat some GMOs, you get a vaccine, you get, your environment, you're breathing in a lot of chemtrails and heavy metals, and it offsets, or you go through like a really tragic period emotionally, and what it does is it causes the microbes to flee the red cell. And then that's what inflammatory disease is. And the cell starts to collapse, and it no longer holds water, it no longer holds oxygen, it no longer transports food to the body. So your body is actually like the bad side of cargos, where you're just degenerating or breaking down. And then what happens is they start to clog up and the blood thickens. And then, you start to get every kind of disease there is, because the basics for your machine to run and operate is bad. And then you can have things called red blood cell strokes, and heart attacks because the artery blood clogs up in such a way that it blocks all of the channels. And then what happens is even worse. So